Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming to today's event, Racism, Black History, and the Future of Black Education in Alberta. My name is Sunny Johal, and I am the program assistant with the Office of Human Rights at MacEwan University. Before we proceed with the event, I would like to do a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the land we gather in Treaty 6 territory is the traditional gathering place for many Indigenous people. We honor and respect the history, language, ceremonies, and culture of the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit who call this territory home. Thank you. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A function on the bottom of the screen. I will now hand it over to Mr. Chaudhry. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Sunny, and yeah, welcome everyone. Really happy to have you with us today. So today we're joined, really excited to have Andrew Parker with us today. So those of you may know Andrew Parker, professional athlete, educator, community activist, coach, mentor, the pride of the North Side, as I think he likes to allude to as well. And I think it's really great that we have someone like Andrew here. He's a really strong proponent around, addressing racial discrimination, not just in society, but in schools specifically. And so we're really happy to have Andrew with us today to just really get real about some of these topics and help inform on some of the things that, his work has had him kind of be more aware of, how he's challenging that, and hopefully how we can also challenge that a little bit more. So I'll turn it over to Andrew to get us started. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to use the Q&A function in the chat screen. And we'll be making sure we monitor that as well. But thanks so much for joining us today, Andrew. Really appreciate it.
Perfect. I just want to check and make sure that everybody can hear me. So maybe Irfan or Preet, you guys can just say, hey, you're good to go.
Loud
And
and clear, loud and
okay.
clear.
Before I get started, I just want to say, in the name of the beneficent, benevolent, the one whom all praises due, we give praise to you. I want to give a shout out to all of those who are observing the faith of Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, or if you have indigenous perspectives on faith and spirituality, I want to acknowledge that as well. Which, what was acknowledged earlier is that we're on Treaty 6 territory, and I acknowledge that as well. This land belonged to the indigenous people long before colonization happened. And I think it's instrumental for us to understand that and to acknowledge that before we ever engage in anything related to educational practices, and not just as a treaty acknowledgement, a true acknowledgement of the direction Canadian society will be going in. The heading of my presentation is Racism, Black History, and the Future of Black Education in Alberta. And I'm just going to scroll down on my screen so you guys can see everything, okay? And of course, my name is Mr. Andrew Parker. I'm a 20-year community basketball coach. I started coaching when I was 17 at Castledon's YMCA. And I've been running the Pride of the Northside basketball tournament for 11 years. It would have been 12 this year, but we stopped because of COVID-19. We didn't want kids to get very sick. I'm also a member of the University of Alberta Golden Bears alumni and a former professional basketball player. And I've taught, I don't know it says 7 there, but it's actually closer to about 9 years now that I've been a teacher with the Edmonton Public School Board. Proud husband, father of 2 amazing kids, and a member of the Caribbean community, but also the African Caribbean community as well. And I'm also the teacher sponsor of the Black Student Association at my school, which I'm so thrilled. So excited for the allies and Black students have come together this year to support each other during Black History Month. And of course, being the Black Teachers Association co-founder alongside my sister, Sarah Adamakowansa, who I will be referencing later in this presentation. So before I get started, I've actually separated this presentation into 3 parts. Number 1 would be Black history, but through a different lens. I'm going to bounce around through different understandings of Black history. Then I'm going to touch on racism and the challenges of racism with 5 or 6 major themes. And finally, I'm going to talk about the future of Black education in Alberta and where we are in this work and where we'd like to be. So Why is Black history important now and forever? Well, first of all, I'm going to engage in a poetic reflection. It was actually a article in the ATA magazine called "Where Do I See Myself?" It was a poem that I wrote about a year and a half ago and submitted to the Alberta Teachers Magazine in our recent fall issue, which was dedicated to Black educators in Alberta. It was myself, Galen Wilson, Roz Smith, Sarah Adamakwantsa, Dr. Jennifer Kelly, a number of great Black educators in our province, and it was kind of our coming out party. As part of that coming out party, I wrote this poem, and I've actually added some slides to this poem, and I'd like to share it with everyone here. And I hope that you guys will have some reflection as you read and listen to this Black history dedication by myself. Where do I see myself? I don't see myself in the classroom, but I see myself on the field and on the court. Brothers that can jump high and sisters that can run swiftly, leading in these areas effortlessly. I see myself there. I like seeing myself there, but I'd like to see myself in other places too. Where do I see myself? The textbooks barely show any of my ancestors or people from my culture, but there's no shortage of European history or legends. When my history teacher places pictures of the greatest contributors to history in the classroom, none of their faces are Black, except for one or two people. Does that mean that only one or two people from my culture matter in history? Who knows? Where do I see myself? My English teacher talks about the greatest writers, Hemingway, Frost, Shakespeare, Kipling. When I suggest authors that are Black, sometimes they get supported, and this feels good. But other times I cringe when I hear my teacher use the N-word from text selected for our class. It's a double-edged sword. I desire representation, but I don't always want to read about negative experiences related to my community in front of a largely white class and a white teacher. Where do I see myself? My school staff is largely white, except for my custodians. All of my coaches don't look like me. My culinary arts teacher, my dance teacher, and my physical education teacher. I really like them and I admire them, but every year I hope that I can see at least one teacher that looks like me. Where do I see myself? When I see someone from my culture in my school, I acknowledge them. A nod, a high five, a joke, a brief conversation. It feels good to see them before our teachers quickly escort us back to our rooms. When I see someone else that looks like me in class, I feel joy, confidence, I feel supported, even if we never speak. I know that they are there and they know I'm here. We see each other and we see ourselves. If I get in trouble and have to go to the principal's office, a number of the admin team at my school don't look like me. I mean, they all went to university. They all probably started out as teachers and they're all probably friends outside of school, but none of them look like me. Does this mean that I'll be treated differently because I don't look like them? I hope not. Every police officer I've ever met in my life was white, even as a youth. We were taught that officers are here to protect us, but as a Black man, as soon as I transition past puberty, am I the person that these officers are protecting others from? Even though I feel like I'm the one that needs the most protection. In pop culture, I see myself as a rapper, a singer, a comedian, a dancer, all things that I enjoy, but how often do they show us as scientists, astronauts, mathematicians, doctors, professors of education, and drama and calculus teachers? How often do we see this in real life? Not often and not enough. I see myself at home, chilling and in my sisters and brothers' facial features, in the traditional cooking that my mom makes, the shows that my dad watches, the magazines that we subscribe to, the clothes that we wear, and the music that we listen to. I see myself there. I see myself a lot there. I see myself on the news as somebody dealing with a lot of complications. And I basically complied when the officers justified the use of lethal or excessive force as an inconvenience to a shopkeeper, a person accused of theft. Even when my dad is in the store with me, defending me, I see myself as Trayvon Martin, walking home from basketball practice, my hoodie on and my music playing loudly, followed by shadowy figures who think I am not in the right neighborhood, even though this is my neighborhood. Where do I see myself? In Breonna Taylor's shoes, home invasion, but by those who are supposed to serve and protect. What did she do wrong? Was her life not worth an explanation? Her family's grief and a hashtag and some money, but no justice. I see myself grieving for her, even though she wasn't my sister. She still feels like my sister, and I miss her. Where do I see myself? I see myself at work as the only Black teacher on my staff, asking questions way above my pay grade, asking them regardless, being told that I am being helped, even though I don't feel like I'm being helped. I don't feel like we are being helped. Requesting for supports for kids that look like me, being told that our group has ties to terrorism from people who should know better, looking into the youth's eyes, knowing how badly they desire change, them looking at me, wondering if I can be the one who will fight for them, because their voices are continually silenced by all adults around them, except for me. Oh, I pressed annotate there, guys. Sorry about that. Let's go back here. Oh, Irfan, I'm not sure what I did, but let me press that again. Oh, here we go, perfect. Where do I see myself? I see myself becoming more than a teacher. I see myself giving more of my time, more of my energy, more of my life, trying my best to balance between being a dad to my kids and a mentor to the youth in the community, finding others that believe in this dream, a more equitable society, making mistakes, trying to learn from them, waking up every day, looking at myself in the mirror, making sure that I'm the same person who sees himself doing the work for our community. And that's my understanding of Black history. Where do I see myself? Do I see myself in these spaces or not, and why? But let's get to the hard conversation. Racism. According to Webster's dictionary, racism is prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism directed against a person or people on the basis of their membership in a particular racial ethnic group, typically one that is a minority or marginalized. But sadly, it's more than that. Racism is the marriage between privilege, discrimination, and supremacy. There's a long history, many players, institutions, economies, and political platforms that were founded on this ideology. And it's unfortunate. Racism is a problem. This is something that doesn't get said enough in society. We tend to acknowledge that racism exists, but we have to also mention that it's a problem. Parents, children, elders, this is the time right now to address what racism is in our province. Last week, a Black father was killed by Calgary Police Service. Now, the problem isn't who did it, where it happened, or what happened. The problem is, why didn't anyone see another suitable response that could prevent a travesty of this nature? Racism has 6 faces, or at least 6 according to me at this point in time. It could be 7, could be 8, could be 9, could be 3, but 6 I'm focusing on in this presentation. Gatekeeping, silencing, privileged, controlled representation, brutality, and job meritocracy. Gatekeeping occurs when someone believes themselves to be the keeper of an ideology, institution, platform, or voice in any area of prestige. Ideally, this concept is closely related to like the bad doorman or a bad bouncer. And if you're a person of color and you've been in the nightlife before, you know who some of these people are. You definitely know who the good ones are too, but you definitely know who the bad ones, and everyone else does too. Common phrases you'll hear: who are you? Oh, you have to wait this long. I'm sorry, we can't do that. Here's the only way you'll be allowed to. You're not meant to be here. We can't do this because it's too political. These are the words of gatekeepers. Sadly, the gatekeepers in our presentation have to do with race. Gatekeeping continued. Where will I see this, or where will we see this? Well, in the political world. You can be a Black politician as long as you use the strategies and optics of the dominant culture. You can lead a party if No one from the dominant culture is in contention. Economics and businesses, rich versus wealthy. Who gets to be wealthy and who gets to be rich? You can achieve a set of money if you follow the path of the predominant culture's predecessor. And this is a big challenge. In education, my field, you can become a principal as long as the dominant culture's head principal approves and their superior does as well. This is a challenge I've heard from a number of teachers, Black teachers, BIPOC teachers in Alberta this last year alone, and definitely at the beginning of the Black Teachers Association's formation. You can become a teacher if you fit the quote unquote culture of the school, or if one of your colleagues who isn't Black co-signs you. Sports is the less common one known in terms of gatekeeping, and I'm going to speak on it because I don't think it gets spoken about as much as it needs to. And my friends at the Black Coaches Association of Canada will probably adhere to this as well, and it is a challenge. So you have situations where teams that openly welcome Black athletes into their program, but sadly do nothing to support the Black culture or Black history or Black History Month or the promotion of Black coaches into your programs. There's a number of programs right now in our province that could greatly benefit by having Black coaches. Unfortunately, for some, they've had to go the route of independence where they're like trainers and, you know, skills coaches, which is great. But wouldn't it be nice to see them be assistant coaches or head coaches? And who would be willing to let that happen? These are questions we're asking. Number 2 is silencing. Examples. This isn't a real problem. You know, we got to think big picture. That's going to take too much time and resources. This is actively how some institutions aim to silence the voices of marginalized communities. Sometimes this process is presented as being natural or normal, but it's quite insidious. Having the means to amplify the voices of the Black community, but refusing to do so because it doesn't fit the culture of an institution, business, or educational hierarchy. And this happens more than a lot of people would actually believe. Seeing the work of various Black community initiatives and actively ignoring that work, actively denying opportunities to support these groups, picking and choosing which Black organizations you intend to work with, stating that we support all Black communities, just look at the work with this institution, while simultaneously silencing the voices of groups that are well aware that you're afraid of the messaging and the initiatives of the leaders. Privilege, number 3. Now, suppose someone had a knife in their back, figuratively speaking, of course, and a person who had a sliver on their hand complained that not enough people are concerned about their sliver when they are in direct sight of the person with the knife in their back. Well, this is privilege. Complaining about minor inconveniences when others are facing worse conditions, you prefer to address your condition because acknowledging the knife person's position makes you uncomfortable. And this is the uncomfortable part of anti-racism work, is acknowledging that privilege exists. Complaining when the marginalized receive equity, not privilege, not even privilege, just equity. Ignoring the presence of privileged, able-bodied, English-speaking Western North American, and sometimes skin tones. There are inherent privileges for each in these categories. With those privileges, there are really lots of pitfalls, and not recognizing that everyone around you looks like you, speaks like you, is like you, and ignoring all quote-unquote others. Controlled representation, as Brother Samuel L. Jackson from Django Unchained with his snarly eyebrows facing downward. And if you are familiar with this movie, his role was essentially being Leonardo DiCaprio, who is the master in that movie, his right-hand man per se, but still, he was still considered a Black man. So what is controlled representation? Controlled representation is when an institution uses someone from the community to speak on topics, but from the lens or voice of the institution, not the community. Oftentimes, this role is provided with a set of conditions that forbid the members from the community from mentioning certain words or discussing certain topics or aligning with the community that they were supposedly speaking on behalf of. It's a big challenge. This often comes with a price or a job title. If you were to better understand this, and essentially what you're going to do is consider the nobles in pre-revolutionary France. They were provided with privileges as long as they adhered to the wishes of the king. Also, these individuals may be given tasks that the leader of the institution may not be comfortable with, thus sheltering them from this work by using people from the culture to speak on behalf of the culture, but from an institutional lens. It's a brilliant tactic. Answer the question with someone that looks like the community. However, the answer comes from the institution and sadly adheres to systemic racist practices while using the member from the community to do this. Puppetry is also a word that characterizes this practice and its actions. Essentially, it's providing a black face to appease the black masses upset, but using someone that essentially adheres to the concerns or adheres to the fragility of the privileged, super dominant culture. Brutality. A man walking with a racist flag, calling for the death of the president or the prime minister, sadly, is more free than a black man dealing with mental health, holding a stick, defending himself from a dog. Justified excessive use of force. He deserved it. He was coming to hurt me. I had no other choice. Sadly, in these situations, someone in a position of power and authority can other individuals and use this to justify the use of unnecessary force. Tragic situations and even dangerous ones need calculated strategies, not knee-jerk reactions. In these spaces, one must also question the actions of those in positions of power and authority. Where did the fear come from? Where did the discrimination come from? Where did all of this come from? Where? You know, there's this myth that black people necessitate more force because they are strong enough to resist. That's a lie. The desire to live is very strong, and acknowledgement that losing your life could happen in these situations heightens that sense for sure. But suppose an alternative was set in place, starting at varying degrees of responses where lethal force and tasers are the last resort, not the first. This is what the black community is asking for us, which sadly should never be an ask, because if the justice system was just, it'd be something that would be universal, not universally disputed. Job opportunities and meritocracy. What are the limits on certain jobs? Now, for the 50 or so people that are here, or 40 or so people that are here, we've got a real talk question. And some of you may want to revisit this in the question and answer period. How many black people work at your job? How many Asian people work at your job? How many Muslim people work at your job? 2S LGBTQ. How many of these people hold positions of authority? If we're talking about education, how many of these people are department heads? How many of these people are assistant principals or principals? How many of these people are head coaches? Why is this the case if there are absences? And I can say right now in the province of Alberta, from the folks I've been talking to, this is a challenge. You're incredibly lucky if you have 2 or more BIPOC members at your school. If we flip it to business, CEOs, managers, general managers, CFOs, all of the above. Where's the representation? Now we have the question, but we have to ask ourselves, who has addressed this effectively from outside of the community? Have the politicians, have the superintendents, have the police chiefs, have the CEOs, have your friends. Have they addressed this effectively? And of course, we ourselves will address this. But in terms of real ally work, this is where it begins. To question, number one, and number two, to try and find answers. And then you have to revisit the institution itself? What are the company's goals? If they say that the goal is for diversity and equity, where is that demonstrated? If you say that you have a diversity team and there's 2 Black people on a diversity team, but the 155 other employees are from the dominant culture, have you truly addressed diversity and equity? And the answer is no. For a lot of spaces, the answer is no. And in some of those spaces, the answer is yes. And this is where we turn the corner in this presentation, guys, from talking about racism, from talking about Black history, to talking about the future. Guys, the future of Black education in Alberta is the Black Teacher Association of Alberta. The work that we've done for the last 2 years, largely independent of major institutions, with the exception of the Alberta Teachers Association, a major shout out to Jason Schilling and Heather Quinn, who responded to our calls for action after the murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. They supported us. But the Black Teachers Association of Alberta is a close-knit group of BIPOC educators and allies from Edmonton, from Calgary, from Red Deer, from Fort Mac, from Lethbridge, EAs, custodians, teachers, assistant principals, and there's even 1 or 2 principals that are a part of us as well. We created this group to address some of the major issues, not just in society, but specifically in education. And we believe that education has the capacity to change society, because it does. If children are taught to be anti-racist from the time they're 5 or 6 years old, imagine what type of adults we'll have in this world. Forget even the world. Imagine what type of adults we'll have in Edmonton, Alberta, where MacEwan is. We could potentially create a better future for Black educators and all educators by committing and supporting groups such as ourselves, the Ontario Alliance of Black School Educators, ONAVs, BC Black Education, SASC Teaches, the Quebec Board of Black Educators. In a short amount of time, all of us connected with each other. Now it's time for education to connect with us. And the door is open. I'm going to show you 5 ways that we're going to address this. So number 1 is representation. This is my sister, Sarah out of MacEwan. So I call her my sister because she's one of the best friends I've ever had in education. And we never taught with each other. And quiet as kept, we only met each other 4 times in the last 2 years during COVID-19. And we built so many amazing resources, platforms, seminars, connections, supports. We did it all because it was necessary. The number 1 pillar in the Black Teachers Association of Alberta is representation. We are committed to the representation of African Canadians in schools and the curriculum, the resources available to teachers in our province. We are committed to the inclusion of African Canadian voices, history, and cultural understandings into all areas of education system in Alberta. Imagine the faces of the children when they walk in the room and they see a Black teacher. Imagine the joy they get when they open up a textbook and see someone that looks like them, who's not being villainized or vilified by the dominant culture or Eurocentrism, or as a subheading in relation to colonization. What if it was Black excellence? What if it was Black beauty and culture? A way for the community to acknowledge ourselves and celebrate ourselves at the same time while we're at school. Could not our educational experiences increase or improve? Representation is the number 1 pillar. It was the first thing that every single one of us, when we first got together, there were 10 of us, now there's 64. We wanted to be represented. We wanted to see ourselves as principals. We wanted to see ourselves as head principals. We wanted to see ourselves in the Board of Education, whether that's Calgary Catholic, Calgary Public, Edmonton Catholic, Edmonton Public, any single school board across the province. We wanted to see our faces. And it wasn't like a vanity thing. You know, we want to see our faces so we can like celebrate ourselves. We wanted to see ourselves because education deserves it. Education deserves diversity. It's been over 150 years of this country that was built on Turtle Island, do we not deserve to have all of our faces represented? Asian communities, Muslim communities, Arab communities, First Nations, Métis, Inuit, 2S LGBTQ, South Asian. Do we not deserve to be represented? And that's our first pillar. The second pillar is communication. We are committed to providing a safe and informative place where African Canadian educators and allies can communicate with each other on a consistent basis. We have established a hub for Black educators and allies on multiple digital platforms, and the BTA will be the voice of the African Canadian educators in our province. Well, what does that look like? It looks like our Instagram page. Our Instagram page literally just passed about 6,000 followers, which is now bigger than the two major school boards in our city. And we've only been around on social media for a year. And this year, in terms of communications, we've created a number of WhatsApp groups to talk with allies, to talk with each other. We created safe spaces. We have usually about a monthly meeting where we connect with each other, we connect with our allies. Black Teachers Association Instagram right now is doing very well. We've had the 28 Days of Black Excellence, 28 Days of Black History, where we've opened up our platform to our community. There's no like major vetting process. There's no situation where we're like, okay, we're only going to take these people or that people. If you got something beautiful that is adding to the culture, we're going to support you. So we've had musicians, we've had poet laureates, we've had politicians, we've had entrepreneurs, we've had educators, we've had restaurant owners, we've had every single angle from the community live streamed from our Instagram so that the youth can see it and so that our community can see it and that we can support each other and we can open the door to everyone else in society. And prior to this time, sadly, in Alberta, we did not have this level of communication or connection. And as a result of the BTA, we finally do. And we're hoping to stay committed and connected to everyone. Anti-racism. We are committed to the inclusion of African Canadians and their culture, as well as racism and anti-racism awareness at all levels of the education system in Alberta. Our Committee of African Canadian Teachers and Allies will be encouraged and supported. This association will be an essential resource for African Canadian teachers and allies to finally demonstrate the importance and necessity of the voice of African Canadian educators and students in our schools. Think of how important anti-racism training would be for each teacher in every school. Could we stop those practices where our youth sadly are hearing racist comments at sporting events, in the cafeteria, at the mall that's very close to our school? And unfortunately, sometimes by teachers. Now, by no means am I going to say that, all teachers are racist. It's a foolish way of saying anything. I don't think anyone is all this and that, but there are situations where racist or systemically racist practices perpetuate discrimination against our youth, against our teachers, and against our communities. Suppose we had formalized anti-racist practices, not just consultants. Consultants are great. Consultants are great. But every teacher needs to know what some of the challenges are for various communities. And they should be aware of those challenges so that we can better support all youth. Anti-racism right now in our Canadian society is so necessary. A couple weeks ago, we were seeing swastikas, Confederate flags. We're seeing people getting gunned down, brutalized. We're seeing residential schools, the bodies being found. Every week, it's like there's more numbers being added. And we have to ask our society and ask our governments and ask our businesses and ask our educators and ask our institutions, what are we doing to address this? Is it just the celebration of Black History Month or Orange Shirt Day or Pride Week or Ramadan? Or can we commit to consistent practices every day? Holding spaces for youth and allies every week. Encouraging cultural clothing. encouraging cultural practices, encouraging the languages of the people that are uplifting society. One of the best ways to walk hand in hand is to acknowledge the fact that racism is wrong. And I said that at the top of my presentation, but it's true. If all of us acknowledge it, we commit to anti-racism, then multiculturalism, the policy that was created in this country by Mr. Trudeau's dad, will become a reality. And its original intent was intended for languages, specifically in the East. But then it had to open its doors to immigrants like my parents who came to this country for a better way of life. So let's commit to anti-racism. Providing support. We are committed to supporting African Canadian teachers and students in their schools and districts. We are also committed to establishing an African Canadian liaison in schools in the province of Alberta. Our communities will greatly benefit by having a liaison in our schools with a solidified African Canadian role and a presence readily accessible for our African Canadian teachers and students. Guess what, everybody here? The Calgary Catholic Board of Education and my good friend and brother, Matthew Sire, who's one of the strongest voices for the Black community and Caribbean community and African community in Calgary, has established this. He's the first ever race-based consultant. And with his team, the Justice, Equity, and Diversity Initiative, they're getting our community members into the schools to check in on our kids, to make sure they're okay, to make sure if they're not comfortable speaking to certain counselors, that they do have people they're comfortable communicating with. This was something they started working on last year. Now, sadly, that's one example. But there are other school boards out there that in their 10-year plan, this was their first step. And it's hard for me as a Black educator, as a Black father, and a former Black student, and a current master's student to say, why does it take 10 years for one board and 1 year for another? And I think what that needs essentially is collaboration. Collaboration between multiple boards, between multiple communities, and grassroots initiatives. It's a good thing to have consultants, but if you see people out there putting in this work right now in education, the best thing to do is to listen and to bring them on board and try to bridge the gap. But ignoring and silencing is no longer going to work. And I'm not sure if it ever did work. Finally, bridges to post-secondary institutions. Networking. One of our biggest goals is that we wanted to ensure that we had a presence at Teachers Convention. Now, last year was our first one. And I'm amazed by that because we weren't sure if we were going to get it. So shout out to Dan Grassick and Heather Quinn and Jason Schilling from the ATA who gave us that space. And we talked at every single Teachers Convention. This year, we're returning to the Greater Edmonton Teachers Convention with a completely different format, with brand new people coming to speak to teachers. So shout out to Ms. Akuya Kankam. She was a bold voice in the Edmonton Catholic School Board, and Archbishop O'Leary, who started a BSA. Then when she started her BSA, Rochelle started a BSA. Scone already had their BSA, Emmy had their BSA, and then it just started popping up everywhere that the Black youth were saying, you know what? We can do this. And the more teachers we interact with through these platforms, the better. I definitely also want to give a shout out in terms of the bridges to post-secondary institutions. The University of Alberta, Concordia University, as well as MacEwan University's Black Student Associations. What we're doing essentially is having the youth go through 3 or 4 years of BSAs in high school and have a logical progression right into a university Black Student Association. So they're aware of the platforms, they're aware of the connections, they're aware of the people involved, they're aware of the leadership responsibilities, they're also aware of the job opportunities that will come for them after their 4 or maybe 5 years of university is done. And potentially, they will have a connection in their field with an ally or a Black Indigenous person of color. And isn't that amazing? Because with that connection, we can continue to build, and less of our youth will get falling off into the trap and the ills of society if we create these networks. And these networks need the support of all institutions involved, universities, colleges, and of course, high schools and junior highs. We're committed to a solidified presence at Alberta Teachers Convention's GETCA. This annual event in our province will now be a meeting place where allies and Black teachers and education students can meet, network, and receive information related to African Canadian teachers in the field. They'll also get to view our inclusion resources, meet with and communicate with African Canadian vendors, and also get a chance to meet our committee and board in person. So to anyone who's an educator right now, or if you're a University of Alberta or MacEwan education student or Concordia, or for anyone for that matter, sign up for Teachers Convention. We're gonna knock it out of the park next week. Sarah and I and Matt and Akui have worked on an amazing presentation. We're gonna make it really informal so we can talk to each other and hold conversations. It's gonna be a safe space. So some of us are gonna say the right thing, some of us are gonna say the wrong thing, but we're gonna figure it out together. And after that meet, we're gonna continue our conversations and we're gonna follow up with you. This is what the real work looks like. It's not just giving one person one position and saying we did our job and checking off a box. Checking off a box does nothing. You actually have to commit to the work. And for a lot of us in the BIPOC community, it's been difficult. It's been exhausting. It's been tiring. I mean, doing this session is awesome because I love Irfan. He's amazing. He's helped me down. But this is about my 25th session in 3 weeks. I know it's necessary. But one day I hope that once it's implemented into these institutions, I can go back to coaching basketball. You know, I can go back to just hanging with my kids every night. I can go back to like taking my wife to the movies. And I still find ways to do that, but every single day there's something to do. And I'm fully committed to this work. I don't think I'll stop anytime soon. I guess what I'm asking for everyone else here is, are you willing to walk alongside me? So that was my presentation. It was 44 minutes long. I hope I didn't cut out. I see Sunpreet in the house. I see Irfan in the house. And I know I said a bunch of stuff. And I know some of my slides weren't working. I was telling Irfan my daughter was playing piano on my computer yesterday. So I had to go back and take a look at it today. So some of the stuff may have didn't make sense, but I tried my best to share with you an intimate conversation and expression of Black history, racism, and of course the future of Black education here in Alberta. So thank you everybody for your time, and if there are any questions, I'm more than welcome to answer them, and I'll definitely be able to shoot the breeze with Irfan and Sunpreet as well, my new best buddy from North Edmonton. So and your little brother too.
Yeah, and no, thank you so much, Andrew. So again, if anyone has any questions, feel free to use the chat screen. But I think one thing I wouldn't mind reflecting on, because I thought you raised a lot of good points, and I did appreciate how you kind of framed, you know, here's the challenges along the way that have, you know, historical but also embedded, that many of us have inherited, and I think many of us want to know what we're able to do. So you provided some really good kind of, you know, off ramps for people to just consider and explore, and I really appreciate that. One of the things I'm always challenged with, and I would love your experience or your perspective, is how, you know, how we navigate those barriers or those naysayers or those obstacles along the way, you know, in terms of EDI work, or even, you know, countering anti-Black racism. Because I think one of the things you shared that was so incredible, you know, sitting in a post-secondary, that pipeline you're creating, we are seeing the fruits of that work come to fruition at the university level, where we do have students wanting to get more engaged in making campuses more accessible, inclusive for, in this you know, context, Black students. And I think that work is paying off. But what have you observed along the way that some of your students or even yourselves has observed in some of those challenges of getting to the point where you've got to so far?
When people feel safe, they grow. When people feel safe, they grow. When our kids feel safe at school, when they know that they can talk to somebody. Last week, 2 weeks ago, a young girl in my school, we only know each other through like saying hi by, a Black girl, came to my room and was crying. And she said, Mr. Parker, like the something's wrong with my courses. I was supposed to be in your class and now I'm in this class. Is there something you can do? We had a conversation. I talked to the mom, I talked to her, I talked to the counselor, I talked to the teacher. Within a week's time, that child came back with a big old smile and said, Mr. P, everything worked out. That's one of probably like 100 different conversations that BIPOC educators will have that will bridge and ensure that our youth know that they are supported in this institution. Now imagine if the youth didn't feel comfortable speaking to anyone. What's the alternative? Well, then I'm going to the mall. Then I'm going to go hang with the crew. Then I'm going to do this or do that or run down this lane or run down that lane. And then school is an afterthought instead of school being a bridge to your future. So for me, the things that I've seen is our youth are yearning to see themselves, number one, and they also want to know what the future looks like. So we need MacEwan's Black Students Association. We need U of A's Black Students Association. We need the Concordia's Black Students Association so that the kids who are 16 and 17 and about to turn 18 can know what the 20-year-olds, 22-year-olds, 23-year-olds are doing and say, okay, that's something I can be passionate with as well. I can get into political science. I can get into engineering. I can get into education. I can get into physical education. I can get into the arts. I can get into chemistry. I can get into agriculture. I can get into the trades. I can get into any one of these spaces because I know that person at that school and they said that I could do it and they believe in me. So that's one of the things I've been seeing. And I have to give a big shout out to Concordia's Black Student Association, MacEwan as well, who had me do some speaking last year, and U of A's BSA, who's helping us out with the summit this Friday. So shout out to you youngsters, and I call you youngsters because I'm almost 40. But you guys are so awesome. And I hope to God that my kids, when they get grown, they can hop right into the work and commit to the events and be surrounded with their culture and have other people come and experience and believe in their culture as well.
No, I think that's great. That's great. So maybe if you don't mind, I'm gonna put the Instagram link for the Black Teachers Association in the chat screen. But do you want to share just a little bit more on what you have? I know you've been planning quite a bit for
Yeah.
a pretty big event coming up. Do you want to maybe just share what
Sure.
it is, where people can sign up, and anything else you'd like to add for the group watching?
For sure. So we have the Black Student Association Summit. It's the first one of its kind. It's happening this Friday. In order to be a part of this event, you'd have to reach out through your school and just have a teacher mentor. If you're in high school, I believe we're going grades 8 to 12 with potentially some grade 7s if their parents are cool with it. Right now we have Jasper Place involved, Eastland involved, Emmy Lizard involved, O'Leary involved, Victoria High School involved, Skona involved, WP Wagner involved. So there's so many Edmonton schools as well as Calgary schools that essentially are going to be hosting the spot, giving the kids laptops so they can communicate to different schools, different cities within the province, and of course different schools within different districts, and then also have presentations from MLA David Shepard, Ahmed Nomadic, YG The Come Up, Black Student Association, Alan and Swally, Colin Crossman, the Black owned market, as and then finally the Honorable Mayor Amarjeet Sohi came through for us. Shout out to Mr. Mayor, came through for us, and he's going to be our keynote speaker for the dinner that's going to be provided by our administrative team. So if you'd like to get interested, just holler at your school, let them know, and we will support you. And if it's one of those situations where it's like, I want my kid to come, is there a way that they can get involved? I'm sure if we connect on social media or via email at agparker@ualberta.ca, we can find some ways for the kids to get this, because this is something that was never out there. The kids never got to meet each other and just talk about what it's like to be Black. What are the things you enjoy? What are things that you don't enjoy? What are the people that inspire you? What are some of the challenges? What do you want for your future? Who do you want to be when you grow up in that space with your community? Oh, this person's from Tanzania. This person's from Uganda. This person's from Nigeria. This person's from Trinidad. This person's from Jamaica, Grenada. We put them all together with some amazing allies who are willing to walk alongside us, and they're young and they're strong. That's the future right there. So if you follow the Instagram for Black Teachers Association, we're running 28 days of Black excellence. I think we're coming up to the last couple of days here. I know Kara West was involved, Africa Center was involved, YG to Come Up was involved. I'm a Nomadic just finished his. We're planning on doing this every single year, and we're probably going to expand this beyond February because Black people exist beyond February. So so if you are a support of the Black community or BIPOC community, or if you have something really cool happening and you want to connect with our platform, talk to me and talk to Sarah, and we will support you and we will uplift your voices because that's what's needed right now.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's the theme this year from the federal government is February and beyond. But I think it's an important reminder to engage beyond just Black History Month. So we have one question, but we also have two comments. I just want to get to that, and then we'll get to the question, and then I'm being mindful of time. I'm sure people are waiting for their dinners to either get ready or not burn if they're making them at home. But I think, so we have something from Julie mentioning, Andrew, you're incredibly inspiring. I can only wish that I would have had a teacher like you in my younger life. Thank you for the difference that you are making inside and outside the public schools. Your energy is empowering to all. I fully 100% agree with that. We're doing this virtually, but we can just kind of sense that energy. And I think that's really, really powerful. So thank you for that comment. Thank you,
Thank
Andrew,
you.
for that energy. And then we also have Jennifer mentioning, thank you so much for your insightful words and recommendations for action. Thank you for making a difference in many people's lives. So we have one final question, and this comes from Valerie, who is also a faculty member here at MacEwan, and one of our key drivers of Black History Month at MacEwan. And I've seen her work February and beyond for sure. But she asked if you could just explain a little bit more about how, whether formally or informally, that bridge to the post-secondary kind of works with some of the students you've had gone through like a BSA at their high school, and then how they've maybe evolved in a post-secondary environment.
So first of all, what we did as Black teachers with our fifth pillar was we understood that when we got into this profession, at times we were in silos. We were by ourselves. We were isolated. And we said, well, how many mentors did we have collectively that were Black, and how many times were we able to get that mentorship, and how much of that was institutionalized? And we found that, unfortunately, sadly, for some cases, it was never institutionalized. So we took it upon ourselves to say, okay, we're aware of where we are in our careers. We want to go find the Black students currently in education at every university in Edmonton and Calgary and Alberta. And we gave them all our contact information. And we told them to call us. And we had, like this December, I sat down with Concordia's Black Student Association and their allies. It was the best conversation ever. We were able to set up a gala for them. We were able to create a bridge for them, for some of our kids who are applying to Concordia, so that when they get there, they already have a mentor that they're aware of. It starts by taking initiative. One thing we actually learned as a group through some of our growing pains was that waiting for things to happen just gives the institution more time to drag it out. And we were sick of it. So we said, okay, if you guys aren't willing to do some things, we'll do it. We'll do it for free. And then we'll present it back like, okay, hold on. Are you guys ready now? And if they say no again, we'll continue to do the work anyways. We know that this is an investment. Investing in your community sometimes is way better than just here's some money. Investing in your community is investing in the futures, and not in the futures of the next generation, but the generation after that. So for Val, like we had to do a lot of legwork. Like Sarah was on the phone almost every day. I was on the phone last week. We were trying to get some people some jobs. We're trying to get some people set up for student teaching. Um, and it's going well. I've had some conversations with some university facilitators in elementary and junior high and in high school. And we're finding our babies. We're finding our kids. We're finding our people. And there's a lot of amazing, brave allies that are doing this work with us too. So I just think it takes initiative. Sometimes you can't wait. And if we keep waiting, that just gives some folks all the day in the world to do absolutely nothing. And we're not about doing nothing ever again, ever again.
I think that's an incredible way to leave everyone with that message today. So I'm going to stop talking because I'm going to spoil it. But again, thank you so much for your time, your energy, your commitment to this work. We are always there to support you in any way, shape, or form that we can. I want to thank everyone for joining us this evening. It's now time for dinner if you're waiting for this to end. So please go ahead. We'll be having the recording available for this afterwards as well. So I'll make sure to send that out. Otherwise, thank you all for your time and energy for today. And thank you, Andrew, again, as always. It's so wonderful to connect. And I look forward to kind of connecting with you in person again at some point soon. Thanks, everyone.
Have a happy Black History Month, y'all. Be safe out there.